And I'm sorry, I have muted everybody. So when it is your turn to talk, please unmute yourself.
Rose, we can't hear you.
Hey, good evening and welcome to JZoo and the annual Martin Luther King presentation. This year, Making Dr. King's Dream Real, Environmental Justice, Detroit Style. On behalf of the sponsors of this evening's program, the beloved community and the Green Team, we welcome our speaker this evening. Assisting me this evening will be Holly Bennett on technical assistance and Stephanie Osborne, chairperson of the Green Team, for the question and answer portion of the program. This evening, our speaker will lead an interactive conversation focusing on the Detroit climate strategy and discuss the issues of air, water, and land pollution, and how racism plays a part in environmental justice for impacted communities. Our speaker this evening is Miss Theresa Landrum. She is a lifetime Detroiter who has been a community organizer and activist fighting for environmental justice for over 20 years. She is a very, very involved and committed person. She serves as the community communications liaison for the original United Citizens of Southwest Detroit. She is one of Detroit's most outspoken community activists and is a member of many boards, which I will discuss in a few minutes, and other groups. Currently, she serves on 2 boards under Governor Whitmer's selection, the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, which helps to set PFAS standards for water in Michigan, and the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, which helps to develop policy for environmental justice. She has a lot of clout. She's a lifelong Detroiter and is one of the individuals who lives in the zip code area of 48217, which is billed as the most toxic and polluted zip code in Michigan. We are grateful to Ms. Landrum for being willing to come speak with us this evening and share her vast amount of knowledge and expertise with the group this evening. Ms. Landrum.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Rose. I would like to share my screen so that we can begin the conversation, if that's okay. So just bear with me as I share my screen. Thank you. Can everybody see that? Okay, thank you. Okay, well, as Rose mentioned, I'm here today to talk about environmental justice and how it impacts Detroit, and specifically minority communities, the Black community. The definition as defined by the EPA, the federal government, is environmental justice, but I call it environmental injustice, can be defined as the disproportionate exposure of communities of color and low income to pollution and its connected effects on health and the environment, as well as unequal environmental protection and environmental quality provided through laws, regulations, and governmental programs. And when we go on to talk about environmental justice, we cannot talk about environmental justice without talking about environmental racism, which is defined as a type of discrimination where Blacks, low income, or minority communities are forced to live in close proximity to heavily polluting industries, environmentally hazard waste sites, and toxic dump sites, such as U.S. Ecology. And as many people know, that my community, 48217, is home to the only oil refinery in the state of Michigan, which is part of the largest oil refinery in the nation, Marathon Oil. And we have been living in neighborhoods that have been environmentally impacted with a vast amount of pollution. And we have suffered through this, in my opinion, and the opinion of the group that I work with, environmental decay. And so when I give you these definitions, I want you to think about into yourself, what do I know about Detroit's history when it comes to Blacks, when it comes to racism, and when it comes to location? And I'm specifically talking about spatial racism. And we'll get into that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now so we can get into the conversation. I want to talk about the wave of the Great Migration. Many people are not aware that after World War I, there was a wave of migration of Blacks and other minorities from the South to come to the greater Detroit area for the jobs. So after that, we learned that Henry Ford, recruited many of the Blacks from the South that were sharecroppers and cooks and others, professions like that, to come to Detroit because Detroit was depleted of its population of the workforce, which were predominantly white male. They went off to war. So to fill those positions, Henry Ford turned to the African-American community to work in the factories while the war occurred. And that was the first wave of the Great Migration. Then there was a second wave when we entered World War II. And many of the Blacks came, as we know, attracted to the jobs. And in my community, we had Dana Corporation, we had Great Lakes Steel, Zug Island, Marathon, U.S. Ecology was a landfill that was beginning. We have Camus Line. We have DTE, which is the coal power plant that provides our electrical power to our homes. And a lot of people don't know that the employment of Blacks during this time, it helped to establish Detroit's middle class because the benefits were there and the pay was there. So Blacks were being uplifted with these jobs. And the area that I live in, which is Southwest Detroit 48217, is part of a community that is called the Triple Cities. We call it the Triple Cities because it is also connected to Ecorse, Michigan, which is formerly Ecorse Township, and connected to River Rouge, Michigan, which is formerly Ecorse Township. And Southwest Detroit, my community, is formerly Ecorse Township. And this area was colonized by the French. And when it was colonized, the area was carved up like a turkey. And the Wyandotte Indians, whose establishment was here, was divided and pushed out of the area. And when the Blacks migrated to this area, the area was a mecca for growth. Because of the within the walking distance of their home, they could actually walk to Great Lakes. They could actually walk to Kelsey and Hayes. They could actually walk to BASF Chemical Company. And this was the historical factor about this is that this is one of the first African-American establishments after World War II. The area was a mecca for Blacks. Their were Black professions. There were Black-owned businesses, such as all the gas stations that I knew had Black ownership. All the corner stores that I knew and grew up with had Black ownership. Our area is the first area to have one of the first established Black hospitals that was built and ran by Black doctors. And a lot of people don't know that. And that hospital was Sunby Memorial Hospital. That's where I was born. That's where most of my family was born, and most of the people in the triple cities of Ecorse and Southwest Detroit. And the unique thing about Ecorse, Southwest Detroit, and 48217 is you can stand in the middle of what we call Visitor Road, outstretch your hands and turn sideways, and you can be in 3 cities at one time. We had Black florists, we had Black bakers, we had Black restaurants, we had 3 Black hotels, because we were not able as African Americans to stay in Greater Detroit or live in Greater Detroit or buy homes in Greater Detroit. And the unique thing is that this was the area where Blacks were given the opportunity to become homeowners. And we all are connected because my family came to Detroit area and lived in Ecorse. Then my family relocated in River Rouge. Then from River Rouge, we were able to buy a home in Southwest Detroit. And that's the home I was born and reared in Southwest Detroit, 48217. As Rose mentioned, 48217 has been deemed the most polluted zip code in the state of Michigan. And how that came about is that in my community, growing up, we were used to the air stinking. We were used to the foul odors from surrounding industry. We were used to the Black soot or the brown air and things on our cars. My mom and dad and all my neighbors, it was a daily ritual to stand in the driveway and hose the house down to wash off the soot and wash out the driveway because of the fallout from the steel mill of Great Lakes Steel. Not only Great Lakes Steel, the Ford Rouge plant. My community is home to more than 42 heavily polluting industries, minor sources and major sources of pollution. But the normality of it was, and the thing of it was that the very place that we sought and we lived, we breathed, we played, and our children went to school, we didn't understand that our environment was impacting our health. In my community, we have a high rate of cancer. We have a high rate of diabetes. We have a high rate of lupus. We have a high rate of hypertension. We have a high rate of obesity. And we have also been deemed the epicenter for the pediatric asthma burden in Lower Wayne County. And so to us, this was normal, but we learned in latter years through the assistance of the Sierra Club that asthma is not normal. They brought in an asthma educator by the name of Elizabeth Milton to teach us that our children being born with asthma was not normal. And so something that we took on an everyday basis, we couldn't comprehend why. And so what I'm talking about here is that I've been privileged in the latter years to be a community resident. This was not my profession. This was out of necessity to learn and to educate my community about what was impacting our health. I want to share with you some things that are personal. On my block alone, one city block, we had more than 12 people that died of cancer. One city block. On one of the group leaders, which I don't do this by myself, we have a small group which we call the 48217 environmental group. And on Mrs. Leonard, Dr. Leonard's block, 17 people have died from cancer. And just to show you, my mother and my father both died of cancer. I am a cancer survivor. My brother had cancer. My sister had cancer. My aunt had cancer. And guess what? We all live within the same area. Growing up, it was not unusual for us to learn that one of our friends had passed away from cancer at the age of 22 or had leukemia. And so what happened was in latter years, we began to try to figure out what is wrong. Why is it so that we see such a wide population being impacted by cancer. And we have to go back and we have to talk about the factors that cause us to be in an area that is highly impacted by pollution. Environmental racism has existed for decades, since slavery ended, and when the Jim Crow laws were enacted by state, local, and federal governments to enforce racial segregation. And a lot of people don't understand that our own federal government was the main factor. They put policies on the books that Blacks could not live in certain areas. Blacks could not buy homes, and also the Federal Housing Administration had a policy where it would not insure homes or loans or mortgages to African Americans. And then it was adopted by the Veterans Administration. So when the African Americans that were entered into World War II and the wars, they could not come home as white counterparts and get a mortgage or get a loan from our own federal government. Also, when they began to build our outer suburbs, there was a clause that stated that the homes being built were for whites only. And we have a professor at Wayne State University, Professor Peter Hammer. He does a great presentation on spatial racism. Then we have a young lady by the name of Donnell Wilkes from Green Door Initiative. She does a great presentation on the aspects of what they now and what we call redlining, that are actually laws on the book to actually steer African Americans to undesirable areas, areas that flood, areas that are next to toxic waste sites, areas that are amidst a conglomerate of industries. And redlining is a form of racism that is environmental racism at its most effective form. Because if you're placed in the area, if you're forced to live in the area, you lack the ability as others to have the inward roads to jobs, better jobs. Also, you're put at a disadvantage because you have health disparities because of your health, because of the pollution that is impacting your health. This leads me to share about my community. My community is one such red line. I know some of you are familiar with the term sundown town. Well, right in here in the heart of Detroit, we were amidst sundown town. Allen Park, Melvindale, Lincoln Park, Trenton, Wyandotte, Dearborn, those were sundown towns. When I grew up, we were warned as children and taught as children, do not be in Dearborn after the lights come on. We had to actually be home in our house because our parents were fearful that we would be harmed. These are some stories that I share personally. Several of my friends were placed in jails for traffic minor violations and things of that nature. And they were teenagers. In high school, I had several of my friends that were actually found dead in various police departments around in the suburbs of Detroit. And we were told as teenagers and young people that they died from suicide, that they committed suicide in the jails. And so, of course, we felt that that was not true. And I want to go back to why I became and how I became involved. Not many people know that Detroit is on top of nothing but a salt vein that runs all the way to Ohio and all the way up to Sault Ste. Marie. So in 1998, as a young woman and working at General Motors and in college, I came home one day and didn't have to work. I worked afternoons. I got on work, had to be at work at 3 o'clock and didn't get off until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I happened to be off this day and I was at home in the bed and I experienced in my home and what I thought was an earthquake. The windows rattled and one actually broke. My bed shook and it alarmed me. And then I heard this big, huge explosion. And when I went outside, I didn't see anything, didn't know anything where it was coming from. And so I went to the community organization, which is the Original United Citizens, which I am the communications liaison for, and asked our then president, Mr. James Childs, did he know what it was? He said no. So nobody in my community understood that we were actually experiencing many earthquakes due to the operation of the Detroit salt mine that is in operation today. So when we found that out after a year, we went to our city council and we asked, how could you allow our homes and to be and lives and quality of life to be impacted by these explosions? Explosions were occurring on a daily basis every day at 3:30 because the city council allowed the salt company to excavate salt underneath our homes. And when they excavated this salt, they used the same explosives that Timothy McVeigh used to blow up the Federal Morrow building to excavate this salt, to get those salt pillars off the walls and be able to mine the salt. Not only that, they were using huge machinery underground to crush the salt. So constantly we could hear the rumbles, but we didn't know for many, many years that it was actually an operation of the salt mine that was impacting our quality of life. So I want to lead into some things that occurred. When we started to notice that our health was declining, young people were, every day we hear somebody got cancer, or somebody had a heart attack, or somebody had diabetes, or somebody had lupus or sarcoidosis or COPD. I began to wonder, and my neighbors began to wonder, what could it be? What could be impacting our health? And then when we started learning about a high rate of mortality rate among newborns, many of my neighbors and their daughters suffered many miscarriages, or they had a baby that was born only lived 12 hours. And like one woman had 3 to 4 before she could actually have a live birth where the child survived. So we took this information to our city council. We took it to the state of Michigan. We took it to the federal government, Region 5, to find out what could be impacting our health. We actually contacted the CDC and asked, could we get somebody to come in to talk to us about the health impacts that would be hurting us? But we got a response from the Sierra Club by the young lady named Rhonda Anderson. She came into our community and she said, did you guys ever consider that where you live at is having an impact on the mortality, on your life longevity, and on the asthma in your children? And we said no. So she said, consider that. So what we did, we asked the state of Michigan, under then the directorship of MDQ at the time, Director Steve Chester, could they help us with a health study? And they said no. We asked them, could they give us some data to tell us what was wrong and why we may be suffering such on large scale, such health impacts? They said there was no data to cover it. So what we did, a small group of us got together with the Sierra Clubs and resources that they provided, and we developed our own health survey. And we really created an intensive, comprehensive health survey. And we submitted it and distributed it through the churches, because the churches are our hubs in our community. And they submitted to the University of Michigan under the auspice of Dr. Buyang Suk and Dr. Paul Mohai and another doctor that I cannot remember the name. And I think it's from the Environmental Health Department. And what they did a modeling, they did a study, and it showed they used the toxic release inventory from the federal government. They used documentation from the CDC under diseases, and they did the collected data from the industries that surrounded us. And that's when they came up and showed that we were being impacted by multiple chemicals on a cumulative level that were carcinogenics, that were known to be harmful to human health. So we had to collect our own data and present it to the state. So with that being said, I want to share a brief video with you so you can kind of understand the work it took. And it took many years, because just to think, we started this back in the 1980s, that has culminated up to now 2022, to learn to be a voice for ourselves. We did not know that we could actually go to our government, to our regulatory agency back then called the MDEQ, which is now renamed EGO, and ask for a public hearing when a company came to open up and pollute, or a company wanted to increase their pollution, or a company wanted to expand their operation. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Stellantis, FCA, Chrysler, and the challenge they're having now with the many air violations that are happening, that we told our mayor that would happen if they allowed Chrysler to expand and create that new paint line, that the fumes would go into the air, would be impacting the quality of life and the health of the residents over there. They actually have a lawsuit over there. And the company in the last year since they completed their expansion has been violating numerous times and had actually been fined by the state of Michigan. So I want to tell you a little bit about my community. When I was growing up, as I mentioned, we were self-sustaining. We had our own Black hospital. We had our own Black grocery stores. We had our own Black gas stations, pharmacies, you name it, we had it. We didn't have to go to Greater Detroit for anything. And if you know anything about Southwest Detroit, we're separated from Greater Detroit by 3 vascular bridges. Those are the drawbridges that go up and down. This community was annexed to the city of Detroit in 1922, the year my father was born. So we were not always a part of Detroit. And we have considered ourselves the sacrifice zone because our government, our local government, state and federal, and our city government has not been what we call proactive to protect the health and well-being of the residents, which we are as taxpayers and stakeholders of the city of Detroit. So we have had to become our own advocates to speak up for ourselves. Because as I mentioned, we didn't even know that we could ask for a public hearing and there we could comment and state our case and present an argument of why this company should not be allowed to open up in our community or be allowed to expel more pollution into our community, air and our waterways. And so once we learned that, we began to create our own community voice. And we have now been privy to go to Congress and speak on a Hill. Actually, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib brought a congressional hearing here in Southwest Detroit 48217 and was held at Community Recreation Center, which is our recreation center, which is the hub of our community. And they talked about how in our only public school, Mark Twain School, formerly Boynton School, more than half of the children have asthma. Not only that, they talked about how our community has had the fastest asthma rates among adults, not only in the city of Detroit, but the state of Michigan. And at one point in time, our community zip code was deemed the most polluted in Michigan. We were number 3 in the nation. So that tells you a lot. And if you know anything about history, if you look across America, our community mirrors hundreds of communities across America, minority, low-income, impoverished communities that have been forced in red line to live in areas that would be undesirable for any other race to live in. And I tell you this story because it is not a story of gloom and doom. It is a story of success, pride, and hard work to make the change that is needed today. I became a community activist out of necessity to learn how I could educate and improve the quality of life, therefore the health of my community, so that we could enjoy a long life. I'm going to stop right now and I'm going to share with you a brief video. Just bear with me. It takes some technical doing. Okay, just bear with me. I'm trying to get it up. Oh, not doing it. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll share my screen with you about that I have. Let me put it up. Okay, get back here. You guys see that?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can see that.
Okay. Here, I want to show you some of the companies that are prevalent and surround my community. That's within a 3-mile radius. And most of these companies that you see on this screen, we can actually get up and walk to. Matter of fact, a couple of the companies, they only are separated from community by a cyclone fence or no fence at all. We are located, excuse the misspelling, of Ford Motor Company, a Marathon Oil, which I can throw a rock on any given day and hit it. We're located near the Cleveland Cliffs, which is the Formula Rouge plant. We have Great Lakes Steel, US Steel. We have EES Coke Battery, DTE, which is a coal power plant. And if you know anything about DTE, it produces 80% of the carbon emissions that are in our community, prevalent in our community today, which contributes to climate change. And we charted my group, the 48217 group, under the leadership and the auspice of Dr. Dolores Leonard. We were successful in obtaining a mini grant. And with this grant, we established one of the first residential monitoring stations, not a monitor, but a stations. And what we did, we looked at the toxic release inventory, and we took these numerous companies and we looked at all of the chemicals that they emit into the air. And we then charted them for those that were known sources of being a carcinogenic, that were known to have do harm to human health on a small level. And we have been exposed to some of the dangerous chemicals from that are part of the climate crisis that exists today. And many of them are neurotoxins. We have Parkinson's disease. We have other diseases that affect you, the neurological system. We have sarcoidosis. We have a lot of things. And you can see benzene, one of these, this chemical here, exposure to this on any level, at any level, is dangerous to human health. And we have that coming out of the pipes of these industries on a daily basis. So can you imagine if you got 42 companies and each company produces benzene and they come together? That's cumulative impact. But our regulatory agency only allows each company to emit, and they only they only judge each company individually. So Marathon can emit so many tons of benzene a year, US Steel so many tons, Ford so many tons, Zug Island so many tons, and they have a threshold. But nobody's looking at all these tonnages together of what it is doing to the human health. And you guys are familiar with Erin Brockovich, correct? When she did this chemical here, toluene, that's the chemical that she discovered was giving the children kidney cancer after exposure. Well, toluene is one of the prevalent chemicals that is being emitted into our air, therefore your air, because the pollution spreads. And here are some of the health impacts from these chemicals. This affects the neurological system, your kidneys, digestive system, your immune system, your lungs. And we have high rates of cancer and various cancers. Are you guys familiar with nasal cancer? We have community members that actually have nasal cancer. I've had 2 girlfriends die of lung cancer. They never smoked. Actually, they were health fitness fanatics. One did holistic medicine. The other one was an aerobics instructor. And I've had more than 10 girlfriends die of breast cancer. And that's just me in my lifetime. If I calculate, I would think it was probably 20, because I've had several where the mother, the daughter, the cousin, they all had breast cancer, all at the same time. And we have a lot of bladder cancer, liver cancer, and as I said, we have a high rate of infant mortality in our community. Also, we have other chronic diseases such as I can't think of the name of the heart disease, but we have people that have been suffering heart disease for 20 years at young ages, 42, 54, 30. And as I mentioned, we have a growing rate of asthma in our adults. But I mentioned before, we have our children being born with asthma. And we have COPD rampant in our community. Hypertension, a lot of people don't understand. Hypertension can be connected directly to pollution. We have hearing loss. Hearing loss can be directly related and connected to pollution. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for now. Okay, we're back up. And I'm gonna try to see if I can get the video up now. Let me just bear with me and let me see if I can get the video up. I just wanted to play this for you guys. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can see it.
This wonder why it's not playing. CDC sent Dr. Laura Berman in to do a 3-year study. Can you hear it? Their samples showed no harm. You guys can hear it. You can hear it. Harmful chemical above the standard, but ours showed that we were off the chain. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Yes.
The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality holds a hearing concerning Detroit's wastewater treatment plant in southwest Detroit. The plant's sludge processing equipment put too many pollutants into the air, so the public gets to comment on the violations.
I really feel disheartened about the process.
Theresa Landrum has lived in southwest Detroit all her life.
There's no notification to the residents when there is an exceedance of a dangerous emission.
Here's Rhonda Anderson, who's with the Sierra Club.
We've been to literally, I'm going to suspect hundreds of these permit hearings, especially in this area.
And that's Dolores Leonard, the leader of the group.
How is that going to impact the workers, some who are here tonight? I thank you.
3 environmental activists working together for nearly 2 decades, trying to convince the government to do more to protect their community.
You know, in the 50s and 30s and 40s, that's when African Americans started to really move into the area.
When you look at it, it's all economics. And we, as I keep telling people, we are collateral damage. We're in the way.
Who has the ear of MDEQ? Do you think they're listening to a bunch of poor Black people, as we've been identified, or Latinos, or people of color, or, no.
This most southwestern part of southwest Detroit, inhabited mostly by African Americans, an area known as 48217, the most polluted zip code in Michigan.
This little diagram here, it shows all the industries within a 3-mile radius that's located around my zip code. This little black outline, that's 48217. Industry, 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 heavy polluters.
At the University of Michigan School of Natural Resources and Environment, Professor Paul Mohai and some others have been studying 48217.
These are the 8 most polluted zip codes in the Detroit metropolitan area. And except for this one out here, they're all congregated around 48217. And not only is it among the 8 most polluted zip codes in the Detroit metropolitan area, but it's the most polluted based on the data that we used from the toxic release inventory.
This is what we call the black side. When I was growing up, all of this was segregated. So this was the only area that Black folks could live in.
Rhonda's taking University of Michigan professors and students on one of her toxic tours of the neighborhood.
So the fish seem to be doing good, but I would eat the fish.
They're looking at all sorts of heavy industry: steel mills, oil refineries, the wastewater treatment facility, and the coal-fired power plant by the river.
The emissions that go into the air eventually fall somewhere, and weather patterns generally go from west to east. It makes sense that the air pollution is getting into the Great Lakes and to more local water supplies.
I've been doing these tours for probably 15 years. And really, they are so damn depressing. You know, it's like, when do we win? When do the people win? You know, all you can do is talk about the bad stuff.
Along with the industry comes the exhaust from trucks passing through. A lot of them headed up I-75 and over the bridge to Canada.
All of those trucks, they back up on the freeway, you know, diesel emissions, and they have an impact on the people's health as well.
The trucks create sulfur dioxide, bad for your lungs, and soot from diesel exhaust is not good either.
Some of the stuff is so fine it can't be seen. We're breathing it every day. So therefore it's locking itself in our lungs and all over our body.
Marathon's oil refinery's been here since 1930. It's grown a lot since then, making gasoline and other things like asphalt, propane, and sulfur.
I taught myself how to read a permit. When Marathon in 2007 applied for that expansion, and other companies since then, I have taught myself to sit down and read.
When we went to our city council and when Marathon asked for a $2.2 billion expansion, they wanted to extend their footprint into the community, we came out in force to object. But before we could even get to the table, the deal had already been done.
The expansion made part of the area unlivable, leading to the buyout of a whole neighborhood. Homes were leveled, grass planted, but many more are still here, still nearby.
Part of the problem for Marathon, they just look ugly. You know, they're massive, they're big, they sit there in front of everyone, you know, and so that's what people concentrate on. No one is kind of looking over here at nasty DTE, that coal power plant in River Ridge, that was actually putting out more poison than even Marathon.
Someone asked, have you tested the soil? And so the results came back contaminated with, you name it,
Arsenic and lead, heavy arsenic and lead. The pollution goes up, but it's locked in. Then when it rains and the rain catches a lot of pollution, it comes back down and go into the soil. So I wouldn't trust putting a garden in these days. And I wouldn't suggest eating anything that came out of a garden.
At one point, the activists started knocking on doors to rally support.
One of the things that came to life was just about every home we visited, someone had died from cancer, or someone in that house had cancer.
Then they wondered whether anyone else noticed what they were finding out.
There had never been a question from the state health department, any state agency, to what was the impact on those residents in those areas. It had never even been considered, never.
We have a toxic soup down here. The cumulative impact, that study that we have been asking for, because Marathon emit a certain amount of different chemicals, DTE emit certain types of different chemicals, US Steel emit certain types of different chemicals, AK Steel emit certain types of chemicals. What is the byproduct of all these chemicals mixing into the air? If one is toxic, then they find out two is toxic. When you combine two toxic things, isn't that a toxic monster?
The problem is, even with all the factories holding their emissions under allowable limits, add all those emissions together, just how toxic is 48217 now? The activists are still trying to find out.
My question is my child's health less important than your job? You know, where I believe we have the technology, we have the science, we have everything we need right now to have both a good paying job and a clean environment.
The group concedes that in the past it did not play well with industry or government agencies. Now they're trying to build relationships to get things done. Last fall, the MDEQ installed an air monitoring station behind the new Mount Hermon Baptist Church, with help from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
This air monitoring station being put in 48217, that is monumental, because I really feel that we're one of the first communities to ever have this done.
I think it's important for us to know what we're breathing. I used to work for BASF and in the automotive coatings division, so I'm aware of toxins and what they can do to your body.
I'm testing for SO2, which is directly related to man-made industry, acids found in the air. We're also testing for metals and particulate, specifically 2.25 micron, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds that are found in the air as well.
The monitoring is planned for only a year. After that, who knows? The EPA is on our new president's chopping block.
We're certainly hoping that that our funding will remain the same so that we can continue to do the air monitoring work here in Detroit and throughout the state of Michigan.
75 miles up I-75, Flint found itself in the national spotlight with its water crisis, something that might bring more recognition to the problems in Southwest Detroit.
Some of the same toxins that were discovered in the water in Flint are actually in the air in this community. And so it took what happened in Flint to bring notoriety to the battles that we've been fighting in the 48217 zip code.
Theresa Landrum's mother and father died of cancer. Her sister was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 24. Her aunt lives a few streets away. She has cancer too.
I'm a cancer survivor. I got cancer. I've never smoked, used drugs, or drank.
I'm in this fight to save somebody else's life if I can. I do it because I love my community. This is all I know. This is all I have. If we as a people, we as a government, we as human beings can work on that problem, I'm sure we can solve some of it and give our children, which are our future, a chance at a better life, a healthier life, a livable life. Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop the screen share. I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into how we had to come together collectively as a community to speak for ourselves, because under the auspice of Steve Chester, former MDEQ director Dan Wyatt, I think, and now up under the directorship of the Eagle, Lessel Clark, we as a community have sat down and we have talked to them to be able to get them to understand that we need the regulatory agency to work on the behalf of the residents. There is a loophole where big business, they are the ones that can, they do self-reporting is what they call it. They do self-reporting. I'm trying to get the screens back. I don't know what I did with the view. Okay, there we go. And so we have been one of the only communities that have sat down on a consistent basis with each director of what we call now Eagle. And what's so unique about our community is that we have been one of the only communities that have had the opportunity to sit on some of the boards of three past governors. I think Governor Granholm, Snyder, and now Governor Gretchen Whitmer. We have had the opportunity, and I'm saying we, that means Ecorse, River Rouge, and South of Detroit, to actually work with the governor. I worked with Governor Snyder on the Environmental Justice Working Group for 2017 and 2018. I was asked to come on that group, and I was very apprehensive because for over 25 years, we've been talking to the state of Michigan to ask them to do a health impact assessment on our community of about why we have such prevalent amounts of cancer and other diseases in our community, and they have refused. So we have not had a very good relationship over the years with our regulatory agency, formerly MDQ. But in the last few years, we have been able to communicate. One of the people that has helped us, as you saw in the video, has been Susan Kilmer. She is an employee of Eagle. And we have worked with a Dr. Keisha Williams, who's a toxicologist. And they have been validating some of the work that we have done and presented to our state, presented to our city, and presented to our federal government. We had the opportunity to meet with EPA Director of the federal government, Michael Regan, a couple of months ago. Also, we also met with Brenda Mallory, and she's the chair for the Center for Environmental Quality under this Biden administration. And what's so monumental about it is community is often never in the room. Community is never part of the decisions that are being made for us that impact us. And so we are now opening a channel where we can be able to have a relationship with our own government, which is supposed to protect us so that we can have input on the policies that are being made. Under Governor Snyder, we were enlisted as the Environmental Justice Working Group to come up with an environmental justice plan. That's what we thought. That's what we thought our charge was. But once we got in the room with all the industry and the agricultural people, that was not true. We were just there to make recommendations, and those recommendations, in our eyes, would never be implemented. Well, and that was one of our challenges. They give you the opportunity to be in a room, but when you're at the table, you never really can partake in the meal. But we have found a bit of favor in this present administration under Governor Whitmer, in which she created the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, which I'm a part of. And we have now been having meetings for closely 2 years to talk about how we can change state policy, how we can help change federal law to protect environmental justice communities. Because I have a saying, pollution has no boundaries. What impacts me impacts you. What impacts you impacts me. And what people don't understand is that we're all in this fight together because now we're in the midst of a climate crisis. And if we do not turn it around, this will be devastating for human life. Because I just sat and watched a program about how our oceans are heating up 30% faster than the scientists had predicted. That means if our oceans are heating up, that means our lakes that provide our life-sustaining water is heating up. And when that happens, that means dangerous algae and other things are coming into our water, impacting our water. So we cannot live without water. We cannot live without air. So those are some of the things that we work on here in 48217. We have been privileged to sit down and establish relationship with Marathon Oil, which came out of the 2003 blackout. When the blackout happened, all pollution controls ceased to operate. So that meant that Marathon, the wastewater treatment plant, Zug Island, the incinerator at the time, they were just spewing poison all in the air, unknown to people. And we should have been told to get out of the area because those dangerous chemicals were in long-term effect, probably won't come for 10, 20 years, will be impacting our health. And when we learned that the pollution controls had shut down at Marathon Oil, I went up to Marathon's location and they actually had the police, Melvindale police, would not even allow us out of our own community. You guys remember what happened to Katrina, right? In Louisiana, when Katrina hit, the people were not allowed to go over to neighboring communities to get away from the devastation of the hurricane. Well, that's actually happened in the city of Detroit, and nobody talked about it. Matter of fact, Dearborn evacuated their residents. Melvindale evacuated their residents during the 2003 blackout when the poisons were found to be emitting to the air. But the city of Detroit failed to evacuate our community, which Marathon sits in 48217. We were told, oh, if you want to leave, leave. Other than that, stay in place. Nobody was there to protect us. Nobody was there to give the order to say, get these people out of there. So we experienced what the people in New Orleans experienced when the mayor failed to mobilize the public transits to go door to door and evict the people, evacuate the people out of the area. And you saw what it did. It did great bodily harm and death. I actually had friends who lived next door who several of their relatives were washed away during Katrina, when we could have used our own common sense and say, somebody needs to do something. So we have to place the blame where the blame goes. We have to place it upon ourselves if we're not educated on our environment around us. We have to blame it on our local government if they fail to protect us. And we have to blame it on our state government and federal government if there are not laws in place to protect us, and therefore we can utilize. On the MAC-EJ, the Michigan Advisory Council for Environmental Justice, that position, the public advocate, which is the position held by Regina Strong, she's a former Sierra Club member. That job was created. It came out of 33 recommendations that the Environmental Justice Working Group that I worked on under Governor Snyder. And it would not have happened if I had not been in the room to say, we need a direct conduit. We need a direct connect to the governor. We need a direct connect to the establishment and administration so we can have somebody to talk to. So that position came out of that. Not only that, 33 recommendations came that would impact the air quality, the quality of life, an evacuation plan, and create a manual for residents of Greater Michigan to read and understand about environmental impacts. So what we're working right now on the MAC-EJ, we're working for those 33 recommendations that were created under Governor Snyder to be implemented in Michigan today. One of those things is an enviro screening tool, which would utilize every kind of access about air, water, and soil contamination that would be harmful for everybody. And if people don't know, I mentioned Donnell Wilkes about Green Door Initiative. She does a great workshop, and she shows that out of the 144 square miles of the city of Detroit, if you live in the city of Detroit, you're more than likely to be living on top of contaminated soil, next to contaminated soil, or next to a facility that is emitting dangerous and harmful chemicals that are impacting your health. So when I say what impacts me impacts you, it's the pollution is growing. Under the study that Dr. Paul Mohai did, as you saw in the video, he and his group, and Dr. Stuart Batterman of University of Michigan, they have found that there is a veil of pollution over the city of Detroit that is growing. It's locked in. So all the greenhouse gases that go up, they disappear, but they don't dissipate. You can't visually see them. So that means the pollution that is impacting me is probably impacting you where you live at. And a lot of people don't know that. Because when we fight climate change, this climate change is a global crisis. And the United States, in all its magnificence and all its wealth and power, we're far behind other countries when it comes to protecting the environment and fighting this climate change. As you see, just last week, one of the largest glaciers in the world, part of it collapsed because climate change has increased the heat so fast that that glacier is melting 30 times faster than predicted by the scientists. What does that impact? It impacts our oceans. Our whole ecological system is being impacted. So we, as people, we must become cognitive of that. And we must learn to be a voice and stand up for what is right. And what is right is protecting Mother Earth. What is right is protecting Mother Earth for the heirs, which are our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. We're talking about becoming carbon neutral in 2050. To me, that's irrational. We should be carbon neutral now. We should do everything in our power to eradicate and to arrest climate change, because science has been proven wrong when it comes to projecting or predicting how fast climate change will impact Mother Earth. And so I would rather be proactive than inactive to stop something that is going to end the life of Mother Earth, therefore human life. And right now at this time, I asked Holly to put some questions up in the chat. I want you to interact with me. Anything you want to ask me, please ask me, so that we can have a conversation where we can share and I can learn from you what we can do together to work together to be able to address climate change and the pollution issue in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan.
Theresa, we do have one question in the chat from Jackie. She wants to know how we can get involved with your organization. And I know you're involved in many, so if you can let us know which ones we could be involved in, that would be great, and how to become involved.
Okay, I'm a volunteer as well as a member of the Sierra Club, and that's one of the largest environmental justice organizations in the nation. And what you can do, you can volunteer. Every year, they have open positions where people can come and volunteer. That's the Sierra Club. Also at Green Door Initiative, they have the same. SDEV, that's Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision. That's another organization I'm on the board of, and it's in Detroit, and it's located in I call Greater Detroit, over there off of Clark. So volunteering. Also make donations to the organizations you know that the money is actually going directly to the work that the people do. And my organization, what we do, as you saw in the video of Rhonda Anderson, we do toxic tours. We do them for free. And before COVID, I've been doing toxic tours for over 15 years. So before COVID, we would actually, if you had a group of, got a bus for 46 people, 56 people, we would actually bring you to our community, and we would take you to DTE to see and show you that DTE sits on the mouth of the Rouge River and right on the border of the Detroit River, which has a intake valve that is on Canada's side that takes in the water. The water then goes to our wastewater treatment plant, which you saw in the video, which is one of the largest polluters in the state of Michigan, because it's been grandfathered in. Regulations didn't come until the about 1963. So many companies that were in existence have been grandfathered in, and they are not regulated for pollution. And the wastewater treatment plant, the largest municipal water system that cleans our water in Michigan, happens to be sitting right in Detroit. So we tell people, volunteer, actually come and live the experience, see what the people deal with every day, and listen to their stories. And we fail to listen and hear, because if the water is poisoned, you can't drink it, I can't drink it, other communities can't drink it. And then also advocate to your state regulatory agency, which is EGLE. We have asked EGLE, and which now I'm part of Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. And if you know, some of you know, PFAS has become talked about more, and that's the product that fights fires, the fire retardant that firemen use to coat their uniforms so they won't get burned, what they use in fire extinguishers, what the firemen use to put out the forest fires in California and Colorado. That's PFAS, dangerous chemicals. So help us to advocate for them to stop using those dangerous chemicals. Some of the companies are transitioning away from that, but still the majority of the companies are still utilizing PFAS. And if you know anything about the PFAS issue has been in news of late, Ascoda is an epicenter for PFAS and PFOS contamination. I happen to be on the MPART, Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, and Michigan has now set standards of PFAS in our drinking water. PFAS is dangerous forever chemicals. That means once it's in your body, it stays in your body. And as you intake it, it continues to build and build and build. And what they did in Ascoda, the people were being sickened by PFAS so much, they actually went and tested their blood. They found that the bodies of the humans tested had so much PFAS in it, it was just unbelievable that those people were still alive. And I had worked with a lady on one of the committees. Her name is Sandy. Sandy's husband actually passed away recently. And he was one of the people that tested that had a high level of PFAS in his system, as well as Sandy. So we have to be more protective of the things that we use as products. If you noticed in the news in the last month or so, the Attorney General Dana Nessel has put a lawsuit against 3M and DuPont, the manufacturers of PFAS, as well as other companies, to bring it to the light to the public, to let them know that we're being exposed to dangerous chemicals that we feel that can be regulated better, and that can be stopped. Also, we have public hearings. Matter of fact, we're in the midst. Marathon wants to do a permit to install. That means change the permit that they have submitted to Eagle. And so participate in the public comment. We have to ask for it, and then the Eagle will grant a public hearing. And then that is where residents and people, experts, scientists, academia can come, and they can make comment and get their comments put on record. So become involved, learn to understand that you have to be involved, the permits to install are technical documents. So Dr. Leonard that you saw in the video, she's a doctor of education. She taught herself how to read permits. Then we had meetings and she taught us how to read permits, to understand the scientific and the legal jargon that the companies put forth in a document that they submit to the regulatory agency for permission to either increase pollution or expand the pollution, or renew an operating permit under the same guidelines that have been set. So get involved by learning about your water, learning about your air. Look at your environment, where you live at. What do you think is around you that is impacting you? You have stationary sources of pollution. That's where a factory is there and they pollute. You have mobile pollution and predominantly black carbon coming from diesel emissions from the trucks and the automobiles that are along our roads that are impacting our children. Because if you look at where many of our schools are located, they're located on major thoroughfares. So that roadside pollution is impacting your children. So learn about your environment and what impacts your health. So that's how you can get involved. You can volunteer, you can donate, you can attend public hearings, you can look at the websites if you have the capability of the internet, and review some of the things that impact the water. You can go to Eagle's website, you can go underwater, you can go under air. You can actually go in and they can show you exactly what company emits what type of pollution and how many times that company has violated and been charged with a fine or something like that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
There are two more in the chat, Theresa, and I think I'm going to go out of order because this next one builds off of what you're just talking about. It's a little more specific. But Jane and Bill want to know, how do you think neighborhood groups can tie into the Detroit Climate Equity Advisory Council?
You know what, if I am not mistaken, they actually have membership applications where if you want to be a member, I think you can actually apply, if I'm not mistaken. I hope that I'm correct, because I do know that MPART, the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, they just sent out applications for people to apply to be on that committee. And they just accepted some new members at the last meeting, which was last week. I am, so far, this is beyond me, I am the only person from Detroit on this committee. And I really think that it should be more, because more of our voices should have a say in what is being happening. Now, what I do not agree with, Michigan setting standards for PFAS. To me, that's a no-brainer. That's like lead and mercury. Lead, you know, there's a zero tolerance for mercury and lead being in our water. I think it should be zero for PFAS as well. But Michigan is set around, I think, 8 parts per trillion of PFAS being in the water. And then what you can advocate for long-term health studies, to study a community for long-term and get some data, because that's what we lack. We lack data. That's why the regulatory agencies are able to allow each individual company a threshold of pollution to put in the air. You can help advocate for cumulative impact laws to be put into place, that when a company pollutes or asks for a permit to install, that they must have a health impact assessment in that permit, and they must look at the cumulative impact of all the industries that are around, that are emitting into the air. So cumulative impact is important. And the 2 states that I want, well, 3 that I want to reference that are far ahead of Michigan is California, and New Jersey just passed a very comprehensive cumulative impact law, and Oregon. So Michigan can be a leader if we just, our regulatory agency just change the culture. And that means stop working in silos and start working with the people. We're right now on the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, we're dealing with a challenge, and that is notification. You guys often hear about boil water alerts, right? The thing is about boil water alerts, that's after the fact. We want to be preventive. And you don't know notification until something's wrong with your water, until they send you a boil water alert. You don't know how long the water has been contaminated or the issue has occurred. They don't give you that information. And if you saw what happened in Flat Rock, when they learned that benzene had escaped into the water system, first of all, they don't know how long it happened. They don't know the serious impact that the benzene will have on the people in the future. And notification. How long did they know that there was a dangerous chemical in that water before they notified the public? And that's what we have a contention with right now, notification. If an incident happens, I feel that you should know right away, and I should know right away that something's dangerous, so that we can take precautions if we have to get up and leave our home to protect our children and ourselves. So those are some of the things. They sit on it, hold it, and then you find out days later, months later, that what the incident that occurred was dangerous enough for you to leave your home. And so case in point, I know you guys, if you lately noticed that they had on Schaefer, they said it was Melvindale, but it was borderline Detroit and Melvindale, where they had big foam coming out of the sewer system. They traced it back to 3 sources: Marathon, GLE scrap, and to Norfolk Railroad. And they had sites where they were actually washing the PFAS into the drain, and it bubbled up. Cars were driving through it, and they told them, oh, it's not much, don't worry about it. 3 months later, you find out it was a heavy concentration of PFAS that those people were exposed to. But you find out later, because they'll tell you in the beginning, no impact on human life. But then you find out later that was an untruth, and you should have taken protective measures to protect yourself better.
Thank you. We have one more question in the chat about if if you could speak to, if you know, if there's an established timeline for DT to shut down the coal-fired power plant in Southwest Detroit.
Yes, the timeline, it shut down. It shut down it shut down in June 2020. So the coal power plant in DT is shut down. Now, the Trenton Channel, and that's down by Grosse Ile. I don't know the timeline for that because, as I mentioned earlier, Grosse Ile Channel and River Rouge Channel, they emitted over 80% of the sulfur dioxide, the carbon that was in the air, the sulfur dioxide that was in the air that contaminates our air. And Southwest Detroit is also in non-attainment for sulfur dioxide as well as ozone. And that means that our air quality does not meet the national air quality standards set by the federal government because these pollutants such as sulfur dioxide is in non-attainment. And these companies continue to emit sulfur dioxide. And what we're fighting with right now is how can you continue to give companies permission to pollute when you haven't corrected the pollution problem that you're in non-attainment for? And we can't understand that. That's like you get a ticket. You get 12 tickets, they taking your license. Well, Marathon, they had 42 violations. They have not taken their license. They have not shut them down. And what is now called Cleveland Cliffs, in 1 year that we did research, they had over 42,000 violations. They didn't shut them down. But so we're saying to you, if you can put restrictions on everyday citizens, why can't you put restrictions on industry that is harming people's health? And they can't answer that. And so to us, the regulatory agency does not work for everyday people. It works for industry because they have the big dollars to lobby Congress and legislatures to continue to operate as usual. And that loophole of it's called as the startup is SSM, startup shutdown malfunction. That means a company, when they have a startup, they can pollute as much pollution as they want. When they shut down, they can pollute as much as they want. And if they have a malfunction, they can pollute as much as they want. And we think that loophole should be closed. They should stop that. Once a violation has happened, they need to shut that company down, let that company correct it before they allow them to open back up. So did that answer the question?
That's everything that's in the chat for now.
Okay. Well, let me share with you some things that I really feel that as everyday citizens that we need to be cognitive of. Nobody has your best interest at heart unless you. We learned that during this COVID pandemic. The only people you can trust is yourself to mask up, social distance, wash your hands, and protect your family. So that's what kind of mentality we're going to have to adapt with industry. If you know you live by an industry and it's having an impact on your life, then you need to not be complacent and say, oh, well, my voice won't say anything. Yes, it will. We've had some victories. Over the years, as you saw in the video, we were able to get a grant to establish that monitoring station that you saw. And we together, a group of less than 10 residents, we charted over 150 dangerous chemicals, known sources, suspected sources of pollution that were impacting our community that we have asked the EGLE to look at. The 7 criteria pollutants, which are the known pollutants like lead, PM 2.5, mercury, those are 7 pollutants. Well, we charted over 150. We are advocating to the EPA that that list of criteria pollutants be expanded to include benzene, toluene, and other dangerous chemicals that are we know that are impacting our health, and also PFAS, because not only does PFAS just wash into the water, it rains PFAS, because when the water evaporates, PFAS goes in the air. When it rains, it comes back down. So what goes up must come down. So as we look at pollution, just because you don't live next to a factory or a coal-powered plant does not mean that coal power plant is not impacting you, because velocity of the wind and wind direction often blows pollution into neighborhoods that may not have a factory. I hope that you are familiar with the pet coke. Back years ago when Marathon decided to expand its operation, and what they did, they applied for a permit to install and expand for using $2.2 billion to expand Marathon's facility. That resulted in a home buyout program. In other words, they bought out the area around them of homes. Those homes were predominantly white homes. So the African American homes are still there. Now, Marathon is in the process now of 6-7 years later of buying out homes of African Americans to create a buffer zone. That came from us advocating that they do something, because if you saw in the video, did you see nothing separated that top part from US Steel? Nothing separated that top part from Marathon storage tank, but that wall that we advocated for, the sound barrier, to separate the homes from I-75, because that's a roadway that produces a lot of roadside pollution. So it's out of the advocacy of the community. So our voices are making an impact. And with the tar sands, Marathon decided that they would go from producing what they call sweet oil to producing what they call heavy oil. But in our language, because those words are palatable and they're sanitizing, is dirty tar sands from Alberta come through the Enbridge pipeline. The in-home result is Marathon. What they did, they built a hydrogen plant. And to my mind, hydrogen, you know what that is? The hydrogen bomb. So we actually have a dangerous facility right next to us producing hydrogen to purify the oil so that Marathon can convert it into diesel fuel and gasoline. And that's another thing we found out after the fact. Usually community and the public are the last to know when something has transpired that may impact their health and their life. So the pet coke is a byproduct of them cleaning the to make sweet oil, and they were storing it on the waterfront down there. And you know, they had the condos, they had the apartment complexes and all of that. And then people started to see that black soot on their cars, on their windowsills. Nobody knew that Detroit Bulk Storage was actually storing pet coke on our waterfront, unknown to our own city council. It took the residents, us, we followed the trucks. Once they left Marathon, we went and we saw where they were dumping it. When we brought it to the attention of the city council and to Marathon, this is what we were told. Oh, don't worry about it. It's not going to have an impact on anything. It won't blow. But Canada, Windsor on Watch, took a video and showed the black dust floating across the water to Canada. That's when our own city council acted, and which led to the fugitive dust ordinance that's been put into place in 2000, I think 17 or 18. Not only that, we just had I think it was 19, right before COVID hit, we had a seawall collapse. It was Canada that notified us that we had a seawall collapse. So our own government, our own local government is not even aware of what is happening on our waterfronts. And that resulted in them finding out they had more than 142 companies that were operating without permits. The company Detroit Bulk Storage, our own city council did not even know that they were storing that aggregate. But guess what? About a month and a half ago, another part of the seawall collapsed because of the weight of the aggregate that is being stored on our waterfront. The place that collapsed was Revere Copper. Revere Copper were very instrumental in building the atomic bomb. What happened to that uranium? Back in the old day, what they did was they dug a hole and covered it over. So we were concerned about uranium pollution going into the Detroit River, which is our water source. So we advocated and we really pushed our city to put some things in place. Let me tell you what the company did. The company outsmarted us. They bypassed our city and went straight to the state and got permission to store on the waterfront. Then we, guess what, resulted in about a month and a half ago, another seawall collapse. Another aggregates, more aggregates going into our water. But they have told us, oh, don't worry about it. It's not harmful. I don't know anybody to this day, not even China, after Chernobyl, can tell me how they have cleaned up radiation. Not only that, US Ecology on the borderline of Hamtramck and Detroit has now become a storage for not only PFAS, but radioactive waste for other states because our city council has given them permission to expand. So attending the city council meetings on Tuesday to see what they're voting on, get involved with the state to learn what companies are asking for permission to increase pollution. We had a victory when AK Steel, which is formerly the Rouge Steel Mill, they asked actually in a permit of during COVID to increase lead and manganese, neurotoxins that are known to harm us, and which the south side of Lower Dearborn is in non-attainment for manganese and lead. Public outcry from Dearborn, Melvindale, and us, the communities of Ecorse, River Rouge, and South of Detroit, resulted in AK Steel, which is Cleveland Cliffs now, forgive me, to withdraw their permission to put more manganese and lead in the air. So our voice counts. We work with Great Lakes Environmental Law, Nick Leonard and others. And when we understand that a company is getting ready to put in the permit, we ask them to look over the document because it's so legal. Then we have meetings on Zoom now and on the phone, and they give us talking points so we can take educated comment, make educated comments to have an impact on whether that company gets that permit to install or to expand or renew an operating permit. So we are making, we're just, we got a hammer, but we're beating on that mountain and we're chipping away at the laws that bind us, the laws that don't protect us, in my opinion. So we have had some victories. We had another company come in. They wanted to open up and operate Great Lakes Marine Terminal. They wanted to take over the old site of where they produce asphalt roofing, right on the mouth of the Rouge River, right next to Marathon Oil's storage tanks for their asphalt company. That company came in, and what they wanted brownfield dollars, and they wanted a tax abatement. Once that company said they were coming in, our home property values dropped by half. So the impact is not just with pollution, it's about quality of life, even our home values. Standards & Poor's did a study, and they said that Southeast Michigan home values were growing, except in one zip code, and the zip code was 48217. But what we did, we got a small group. Dr. Leonard was on the Brownfield Regional Authority Committee, and she brought the information to us. We attended their meetings, and we spoke up. Great Lakes Petroleum Terminal, the city council sided with us and voted them down for getting brownfield dollars and for them getting a tax abatement of millions of dollars a year. If they had gotten that brownfield dollars, that meant for every dollar they spent, we taxpayers would give them $2 to clean up a contaminated site that they were going to recontaminate. So we have had some victories. And so we continue to fight. We continue to work on behalf of all of Michigan, of all of Detroit, and all of people. Because as I say it again, what impacts me impacts you, what impacts you impacts me. And we have to come out of our complacentness, our comfort zones of our homes and get involved. And many people are not doing that because environmental justice work is a small group of people that are advocating for the majority. So I hope that I have given you some insight on the type of work. I know we can go into many different directions because we can go to the soil contamination because I also work with soil contamination, but mostly I do work around air. With the soil contamination, as you guys know, the Gordie Howe Bridge is being built, and you know how it has devastated the community of Delray. They have a 1,200-foot plaza they're proposing. So everybody within that footprint was offered a buyout. Those people that lived in Delray that were outside of that footprint were not given an offer. So that meant those people would be living amidst a bridge being built. And so due to the advocacy of SDEV and the CBC, Southwest Detroit CBC, that's a group that was brought together and became a nonprofit in which I was part of and still maintain an alliance with them. We fought. So now there's been, I think, 48 million put into escrow. So the people that were not offered a buyout will be able, given an opportunity to either swap a home. In other words, if they find a house in Greater Detroit and they say that they want to move there, the Detroit Land Bank and the city will fix that house up, and the people can leave that house and go to that house without having to go someplace and try to buy a house and then incur a mortgage. So different ways as residents, we're making an impact. So no matter how unimportant you think a comment or a question may be, it may be the very thing that pushed the needle forward. Because if it had not been for community residents concerned about the truck traffic and the pollution and the soil contamination of the people that would be left in Delray, those people would, the Federal Highway Association that builds our roads and bridges, they don't have any sympathy. In fact, they're apathetic to the people's cry of we're in harm's way. And that's what we found. You have to make them open their eyes and then open their ears to hear the cry of the people. And so we have been called a sacrifice zone. We've been called a sacrifice zone because for many years, our voices have been ignored. And even our own city. And right now, if you notice, our own mayor has never stepped out on environmental justice. He has never stepped out on climate action. And that's what we should become involved and ask him, why are you not speaking up for the environment? Why? Because he wants to grow the city. But as you grow the city, are you going to continue to allow people to move in areas that are harmful to them? I think we shouldn't allow that. So we have to be more advocates by attending the city council meetings, seeing what's coming before them, what they're voting on. Zoning. Right now in District 6, they have an opening for the zoning board commission. And they have asked me, Theresa, why don't you put in an application or put in to the city council person, because the person of that city council district, from my understanding, appoints that person to the seat because they have rezoned. We have fought them rezoning our community residential to M4, M5. M4 and the M5 are heavy industrial zones. They wanted to take R1, which is residential for home, and change it to M4 and M5. We got together, we got petitions signed, we wrote letters, we went down to city council, and we actually had them stop from rezoning some of our residential property to becoming heavy industrial. And they just did it on Mexican Town too. They asked our organization to write a letter in support for down zoning. So we actually got some properties down zone. So even though we're just community people, we're making an impact. It may not be what we want all at once, but it's slowly happening. And that's what we have to do. If you see something wrong, speak up. If you see something wrong and you know it's not right, take action. And like you could call me, you can contact me, you can contact the Sierra Club, you can contact Great Lakes Law, Environmental Law. You can talk to Dr. Paul Mohai, because we often use Great Lakes Environmental Law and Dr. Mohai to be reviewers of whatever permits or whatever actions that are happening in the city of Detroit. And so a lot of people say, well, my voice don't count and it's not going to make a difference. You never know what the difference is going to make until you try. And so we've had some successes on that, you know what I mean? So are there any more questions or anything else one thing I wanted to tell you, we just found out that when they decided to build those pillars and put them on in Detroit, that they found that Detroit, the soil is heavily contaminated with PFAS. So on the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, we concentrate on surface water, groundwater, and well water, and also the Great Lakes. So I'm the only person from Detroit. They were talking about areas of interest. That means areas where the state should put money for cleanup and for study. Nobody was talking about the soil contamination. So I told them that I wanted to say something about the soil. I said, we're talking about water. What about the soil? And out of my speaking up, we have now, they have named Marathon and the Rouge Project as areas of concern in Detroit, as well as they're looking into Delray, where they have the heavy concentration of PFAS in the soil. So if I had not been there at the table and made that comment about the soil, it wouldn't even be considered as being regulated and being a site of interest for PFAS cleanup. So we have to be in the room. We have to say something. We have to do something, because if we close our eyes and sit back and then we look up, we don't know what we'll have across the street from us. When I was growing up as a kid, Marathon had one tank. And in my 60 plus years, Marathon facility has grown to a massive, massive industry that now has over 110 tanks right across from our only public school. So as we were asleep, they were building. When we woke up, there it was. Then they said, oh, you had opportunity to speak, but you weren't there, because we have been asleep at the wheel, allowing industry and putting our trust in the government and agencies, to me, in my opinion, that has not worked on our behalf. So that is why I fight. I don't fight just for my community. I fight for what's going to happen on the east side, what's going to happen on the west side. And when we were able to fight against the incinerator, everybody knows about the incinerator, right? Incinerator was there burning all that nasty, dirty stuff. And most of the garbage that was being burnt for reusable fuel for the steam that went through the city buildings and underneath our streets was coming from outside of Detroit, even outside of this state. So we were burning other people's trash to create energy to pollute us and kill us. And now that we had the incinerator shut down, now we want to know, what are they going to do? Who's going to clean it up? And that's because that's big brownfield right there. So we have to get in the fight. Excuse me.
Well, Theresa, I think that's a great, inspiring, motivating, encouraging note to end on. Provided us with a lot of ways to be involved, and just, I feel like we can all collectively do something, and we can all do something individually. So I really appreciate your talk and your presentation and all your insights. We do have 2 questions, but I recognize we're over time and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Would it be all right if we emailed you and we can follow up
Yes.
with everyone those responses?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'll turn it over to you for some final comments, if you have any, and again, really appreciate your presentation this evening.
I want to say to the Jesus group committee, beloved community, is I thank you for this opportunity, because many times when you speak to people, you're speaking to professors, you're speaking to lawyers, you're speaking to officials. You never hear of an everyday resident. I'm just a resident. This is not my profession that is advocating. I don't have any titles. I don't have any degrees in toxicology or air. My degree is in something else. So I'm saying I really appreciate that you would listen to a community voice. And that's what we're asking our government to allow us into the room, because the experts are the people. You know what's happening in your neighborhood. You know what's happening in your house. They need to listen to us. They solicit us for our vote, then they go and make laws that work against us. No, we want to be in the room. We want to make decisions for us, by us. And so I'm just a resident every day. I'm just, I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother, and but this is not my chosen profession. I do it out of necessity that I need to work for you. I need to work for you. You need to work for me. I need to work with you, and you need to work with me. So those are my ending comments. And so if you have anything further, Stephanie and Holly and Charlie, who wasn't here today, they have my contact information. I'm very open. You can email me, you can call me. It doesn't matter. If I can help you, I will. So I thank you for this opportunity. To the Jesuit, you know, well, I don't know the pronunciation. Is it Jesuit or is it Jesuit? Or is it Jesuit? Jesuit beloved community. I thank you for this opportunity to allow just an everyday person to speak to you about the ways that your health can be impacted by air pollution, water pollution, and soil pollution, and that you stand up and you take an initiative to take an action. If you just listen to City Council once a week on Tuesdays, starting at 10 o'clock, and learn about what city government is doing for you, with you, against you, or whatever.
Ms. Landrum?
Yes.
Ms. Landrum, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Rose.
On behalf of the sponsoring groups, we want to thank you for coming this evening via Zoom to share your obvious passion and depth of knowledge to help us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Theresa.
You all peace and be safe out here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful, wonderful.
That was fantastic. Woo. That was great.